I think we're on. Good, we're good. Okay. I'm going to call to order today's meeting of the Finance Committee. It's, what is it, Thursday, August 13th, 2020. The time's 11:05. I'm Lauren McNally, Fifth Ward City Council person and chair of the committee. I'm going to do today's roll call for us here. We have Rick Deek, Jennifer Ozinger, Anita Davis, Jimmy Hughes, Kyle Mizak, Mike Ray, Attorney Vivo, Domain Kitchen, Julius Oliver, Mayor Brown, Samantha Turner, and Valencia Morrow. We are going to go down our agenda today and discuss new business. And the first thing here is the 2020 year-to-date budget overview from Kyle, our finance director. I know Kyle shared some documents with us earlier in the week. So Kyle, why don't you just let us know where you want to start and we can each pull those up.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Let's start with the one that the top header says June year-to-date major fund spending levels. Does everybody have that in front of them? I'm assuming because there's no reply that everybody does. Okay, what you're seeing here is a side-by-side comparison of our fund levels against budget versus year-to-date expenditures through June of this year. So we are looking at what we have expended based on what council approved for the first 6 months of calendar 2020. And what you can see by that middle column on the top of the first section is that our budget compared to where we stand mid-year, we have spent less than half of our budget that was allotted by council through 6 months. The only area that we are showing that we have in essence exceeded half of our budget per the appropriation levels is in the fire department. And it's nearly 50%, which puts us close in being that those expenditures are being spread evenly across the full calendar year. What it shows in the other funds is based on the fact that the mayor has put out a directive to department heads to try to curtail spending. You are seeing the success of that across that percentage level of showing you that it's under half for the full calendar year. I want to make you aware though that there is some seasonality in this. So there are some funds that the activity of spending increases over the summer where it's not equally distributed over 12 months, that being Fight Out Auto License, that being the park department. But again, it's showing you that where we stand as the end of June, that we are in alignment and actually doing better with our spending levels across all of our operating funds. When you move over to the fourth column, you're going to look at what we've committed to that we haven't paid. Those are our outstanding encumbrances. So when you go to the next to last column, that is going to show you what we have remaining in our budget. And as you can see, the last column showing what is unspent, nearly all of our funds have at least more than half that's still available, which is a good sign that we are doing the best that we can by providing services, but we are trying to provide those services without spending what council gave us the authority to at the beginning of the year, given the fact that we have this problem with revenues. So this is one of the ways that we are addressing it, and we're looking at the fund level. I believe when you get down below in the middle column, and we're still talking about spending, we're going to show you where we were last year at the same time period. And what's most important is, if you look at the middle column, you'll see that this year's appropriated budget across almost all of the funds, except the enterprise funds, was larger. And even that's a more significant sign is that we are, when you do this comparison of last year to this year, we're spending nearly less, even though the budget is greater. So the department heads have followed the mayor's directive and are working to, like I said, curtail spending. And what you can see here in the middle column is the only area that we are showing where spending is greater than where we were last year at this time is in $5 auto license. And the reason for that was, remember, last year, there were a bunch of projects that ended up getting postponed because of timing. And as a result, those projects got pushed out. That is why you're seeing the spending levels higher this year than they were last year. You can also see that the budget is nearly 70% larger for this year than it was last year in $5 license because of these projects being postponed. So those projects got moved into this year, and now we're spending and we're catching up. So that is the reason that $5 auto license is showing that year over year large increase. The only other area that is showing a year over year increase is in the fire department. And that truly has been driven by, when you look down below, when we get to that, has been by the overtime. They are living within their means with their operating budget, but within their benefits and payroll budget, they have in essence exceeded that compared to last year and have exceeded budget when it comes to overtime. And that is what's driving that expenditure level into a 4% greater than where we were last year at the same time. Does anybody have any questions looking at the major funds and where we are year to date for expenditures against what was passed as a budget?
To the chair.
Anita?
Cal, what do we actually take in from that $5 auto license? What's our, that we receive from the state, the county, or whomever?
I'll open that up right now because it's here in front of me. So just give me a second and I will tell you exactly what revenues are diverted. The largest revenue is, of course, the transfer from the general fund. That this year in $5 auto license is $900,000. That's how much the general fund is subsidizing the expenditures in that fund. The motor vehicle permissive tax is a major revenue. It's $375,000 budgeted. We then have state grants. These are projects that we are getting money from Eastgate or from the state. That is $1.6 million. Those numbers Chuck helps me put together because we are looking at what projects are going to actually be started. And as a result, whatever our match requirement, these monies will be funneled to us. And the difference between what we expend and what we get from the state is our match pickup that we, in essence, cover. We also have a $400,000 revenue that because we charge water and wastewater $200,000 each because of all of the projects that go on where they tear up the road surface. Chuck tracks that, and at the end of the year, he'll provide me with a letter based on what he believes each of those two funds need to reimburse the $5 auto license. And we've never been greater than 400K. 200 usually comes from each one, but there is backup that supports that, and the auditors have audited it and they have signed off that that is a rightful reimbursement. And those are the streams of revenue. And the last one is going to be the $750,000 that comes directly from CDA. So that is the revenue line items within that fund. It's the transfers, it's CDA, it's the reimbursement from water and waste, and then it's the money coming from the permissive tax, and then the state grants that we get from OWDA, from Eastgate or the state of Ohio.
So we don't actually receive money from licenses.
No, those don't go into
That's just the title.
license.
Okay.
No, those go into the street department gets those monies for the gas tax and for the licenses.
And our share of the gas tax?
It is going to be in the street department, and that money has increased this year because of the House passage bill that they passed last June. They've increased the flow of funds to the city, and we have built that into our revenue structure, and those funds are in the street department.
What was that dollar amount?
This year we have forecasted 1 second. We have forecasted $2.5 million for the gasoline tax.
Right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mike,
Yes, to the chair, Kyle, and even though we still call the fund the $5 license fee, that we're collecting $10 because it's too difficult to change the fund name, correct?
Correct. We have not changed the fund name.
Okay,
That is coming from the permissive tax, correct.
thank you.
So
any
that,
questions before we move on? Okay, go ahead, Kyle.
okay, if you move to the bottom, we're going to look at where we are year to date with overtime spending. As you can see, what's most important here is when you look at the percentage of what is spent per budget, the only two areas that we have in essence exceeded year-to-date budget on a level of half is going to be in the emergency 911 and in the fire department. Emergency 911 is slightly off by about $4,000. Remember, it took us a few months to get those additional managers, the part-time and replacing the full-time 911 operating manager in place. So the bulk of that overtime was generated for the first 3 months of the calendar year. That has begun to slow down. We believe will actually come in under, as long as we don't get anybody come down with any illness that they cannot work, because remember, there has to be supervision in the 911 center all the time, all 24 hours. That was why we hired a part-timer to help fill that. But if one of them gets sick, we're very limited to how many we have. So that could change, but right now we expect we'll finish the year under that $60,000 by the time we get to December. The fire department overtime, the remaining overtime that's left in that budget is for holiday overtime. These are the days that they work on calendar holidays, and they're guaranteed under their contract that they will be paid time and 3/4. So looking at the far right, when you look at where we were last year compared to this year in overtime spending, all of the red shows you where we have actually spent less than where we were a year ago. So even the department heads are working to curtail overtime. And as you can see, it's been pretty dramatic when you compare it to last year. These are not savings against the budget. These are savings that were materializing because department heads are trying to, in essence, put their workforce out there and try to reduce working after hours as best we can and deliver the same services. But you can see the impact that it's made with a year over year, where every single fund is in the red except for the fire department. And we all know why that occurred, because we've addressed that back in April and May when they had that issue. And that is why these fire department buildings have had to be closed, because that whole budget has been exhausted. Are there any questions looking at the overtime compared to budget and compared to last year through 6 months?
Kyle, I mean, are we being successful in balancing our providing of services alongside of making these huge cuts? Just, I mean, for example, the street department's only expended 25% of their overtime, but I know we recently got an update from Kevin saying we've only cut a third of the lots that we did last year from the street department. So that is a significant decrease in services. So can you talk about what's going on there?
Yes, through the chair. With regards to the street department, Kevin spoke with the mayor and explained to the mayor that overtime was going to start having to be used to tackle that one particular problem. The mayor did give the okay for Kevin to start having those tractor crews work into the early evening till 6 o'clock. So once we get to September, you're going to see the activity in overtime dramatically increase in the street department, because everybody got brought back a little sooner so that they could begin that process of catching up. So yes, you are correct that we were behind compared to where we've been in years past of mowing, but Kevin is trying to, with the mayor's, well, with the mayor's approval, to now have those street department employees work longer days so that we can do additional patching, street cleaning, and grass cutting.
And I mean, I guess we didn't, that's the only department we got an example of, but, I'm sure it's, or I'm asking, I guess, is it also happening in Parks and Rec, water, wastewater? I don't know that environmental sanitation would have as much of an impact as perhaps, Park and Rec not working overtime, but still having to maintain a certain level of services, or maybe it's because our parks have been shut down. I don't know. But are we seeing the same decrease? I know water department had shut off a couple of services back when COVID-19 first started. I don't know if they've put those back online yet or not. Do you have any type of service update in relation to this, like you just explained for the street department?
Through the chair, I do not have detail. I do know that the mayor did ask that departments make sure that they were delivering the services the best they could in a manner that they were at least protecting themselves safety-wise. It's, I gotta believe, when you look at the middle column and you look at where we are year to date, most of these overtime and some of these funds are gonna be more seasonal. One of the reasons that street was down is because also we had a mild winter. That could change too going forward. The police department budget, the reason that you're showing a large year-over-year change is because we're not doing any Opta traffic. Because remember, we were paying for Opta traffic first through overtime and then getting reimbursed at the end of the year. That's what's driving that year-over-year large difference. The Park and Rec overtime, the total budget is $40,000. They typically incur most of their overtime through the summer. So this 6 months is only showing 1 month of June, when really COVID was still very rampant. So I believe that if I were to give you an update right now, if you got a minute, I'll take a look at overtime in the park department and tell you where we are year to date through last Friday's payroll, to give you a better indication of how much has been expended. Just give me a second here as I look this up. Park overtime. So park overtime has not changed very much through the month of July and part of August. They are now around $5,000. So there definitely is savings being generated there. Dawn would have to be addressed if she felt that there was any way that services were being cut. I'm not aware of any, but that doesn't mean that I'm always in that loop. Let me look at street department, where we are to date, give you an update on that.
So I guess what you're looking at, that it would be important for us as a whole to evaluate whether we're, we decreased overtime and we cut services in each department because of the decreased overtime, or if we have now become more efficient in the departments and we're still delivering the same amount of services, and so there's no longer a need for overtime, and that's something that should be discovered before or as you go into the budget season for next year. I mean, obviously the street department had exact numbers for us and we could see, we only did a third of the grass cutting as one example, but I think looking at those other departments as well is crucial to next year's budget, to be honest.
Through the chair, I think that's a very good observation. I also am I think part of some of the departments believe that if we don't make some inroads, that there could be some changes at these departments. And I believe you're getting better efficiencies. What's going to really test this is if we are able to finish the year like I'm hoping, without having to make any sizable cuts, and asking these department heads in the budget meetings, well, if you were able to achieve those numbers this year, what do you think you're going to need next year if some of those services need to be elevated? And elevated, I mean by providing at a level that is going to make sure that we deliver what we promise, but at the same time, not over incurring higher expenditures that we don't need to, just at the, at the expense of generating, overtime for employees. I mean, that is going to be where we have to hold these department heads accountable and say, if you could strive and make those kind of inroads this year, and if we're going to kind of cut services, but we're going to still deliver on those same services, maybe better, maybe a little more improvement, how much additional overtime you're going to need when you look at what was expended this year versus just requesting what was in your budget. Because I think that's we'll be able to utilize those savings if we have to close any budget gaps next year.
Yeah, I think it's important to have an honest conversation though about the services, because, I don't want to see service reduction, because I feel like we're already struggling in some regards there. But Anita, I think you had your hand up.
I did, but it was a quick question to Kyle about the Opto overtime and whatnot. When did the Opto program end last year?
Through the chair, we actually ended it in November, but there was still activity payroll wise because of timesheets that it incurred in December, but we actually stopped monitoring in November.
Okay, thank you.
Samantha?
Thank you, through the chair. I agree with Lauren. We definitely should be looking at that. We can visibly see the decrease in service in the street department and in the parks department. So I would love to see an uptick in that, just because those places are visibly suffering, and it's just causing a lot of strife in the community groups. But my question for you, Cal, is when you're looking at this, for instance, the fire overtime is, from year to date, really, really high. You're saying that this 103,000 is just left for the holiday overtime that's already been budgeted for.
Through the chair, the 103 is the difference between where we were last year through 6 months and where we are this year. What's left in the overtime budget this year is the difference between 425 and 284.
And it was my understanding, and the mayor's not on here anymore, that he said he wanted the department heads to stop overtime, and if they needed it, they had to get his approval first.
Correct. And there have been on 3 occasions in the last month where the fire department chief has had to verify that it was okay to actually pay overtime, because there were some instances where it made more sense to actually do overtime than to close or to disrupt what was going on. So it was approved, and regular overtime was in essence paid, even though we have exceeded the overtime budget with regards to non-holiday when it comes to the fire department.
Okay. And then, but that was for all departments. So if street was getting excessive calls about the grass off the highway, if Kevin reached out to the mayor would give him permission, or, were we just trying to curb that and not really ask and wait until we got our full staff back?
No, through the chair, I think, well, one, Kevin, before he got his full staff, was trying to do the best that he could with what he had for available resources. But I do know in our staff meetings that Kevin explained that, look, that he needed to beef up that operation because, the grass was growing and we were getting rain, and it wasn't like we were going to get a heat wave where there was no rain and, typically halting that grass growth. So I'm remembering those staff meetings where the mayor gave him the approval to go ahead and to start scheduling overtime for those crews so they could go out and put a longer day in and try to catch up with some of that grass cutting that had fallen to the wayside as a result of what occurred beginning in May and June.
Okay. Okay. And then my last question is more specifically. Wait, the mayor's not on here. Okay, well, you know what? I'll hold that because that question is actually directly for the mayor.
Okay. All right. Is there any more questions on the first page? Okay. Let's go to the second page, and the header on the top is major revenue levels. So when looking at this, what you're seeing is what was passed in budget, which is the money that is required to be collected if we were to expend all the appropriations that council approved for. Because remember, our budget requires that revenues exceed the appropriation levels. So if our appropriation levels have declined, we hopefully are able to close that gap, because as our revenues are declining and if our expenditures are declining, the gap isn't growing, it's hopefully shrinking. If our appropriation levels and what we end up spending starts to escalate, it's going to eat into our deficit and actually make it larger. So what I want to show you here is when you look at year to date, what's most important in evaluating the revenues is, remember, your income tax is the major revenue source for the general fund, the police department, the fire department. 911, park department, and $5 auto license are almost funded by the general fund transfer. They don't have a lot of their own revenue sources. It's the general fund subsidizing them that in essence makes up their revenue. 911 has no revenue. The revenue that it's showing in this report is what we've budgeted as a transfer. So the reason that it's showing it's greater than last year is because the budget is greater than last year. So we need to transfer more money that was budgeted to meet those expenditure levels. But what's really important is looking at police, fire in general, because this is where the income tax gets directly deposited. And as you can see, we are not at 50% in the general and in the fire department. The police department is showing it at 50% because they have received their last of their COPS grant money reimbursements in the first 6 months of this year. We budgeted for that. They got their last payment under that grant that's now expired. So that is why they're at 50%. But if the income taxes continue to stay where they are, as we go forward, that variance is going to start growing because they've received most of their grant money up front. But what's alarming is looking at where we are year over year compared to last year. When you look at where the general fund is, year-to-date revenue last year, we had 16.9. We're at 15.1 this year. This all correlates back to roughly our income tax. Our income tax right now, year-to-date against target, is down $2 million. We make transfers to police and fire because nearly 50% of each of those budgets is subsidized by the general fund transfer. So as income tax declines, what we deposit into police, what we deposit into fire, or we deposit into the general fund directly from the income tax means that we're not going to meet those target levels that are required for a balanced budget. So we're going to have to increase the transfer at the end of the year if these spending levels stay constant with what you appropriated, because what you appropriated meant that I had to subsidize so much to make sure it was in balance. Well, as the income tax declines, their main revenue stream is going to be lower. So they're going to need more assistance from the general fund to be in balance, which means at the end of the year, I'm not going to want to have, if we don't have enough money, we're not going to want to have multiple funds in the red. What we will probably do is I'll come to you and look for your input, but I would rather drive one fund deep into the red, which would probably be the general fund, and offset police and fire so that they're break even. We don't want to be identified in our 2020 audit if we're unable to, in essence, soft land this. We don't want to have multiple funds in the red. We would probably choose, along with the administration and council's input, to put all that pain and suffering in one fund so that at least we're in compliance under state GAAP rules. But that will be a decision that we'll have to decide as we get closer to the end of the year, because we're looking at, trying to correct this by, one, using that COVID-19 money as a substitute to curtailing expenditures. And if we can do this enough and utilize resources that we didn't exhaust, we may be able to, in essence, close this gap. But this is the first time that these other funds are going to appreciate. When income tax declines, it directly affects those funds that the income tax gets deposited to, and that being police and fire. Does everybody understand what I just explained? Okay, so when you look at this, another area to be concerned about is the water fund. The water fund is behind, and that is as a result, we believe, of the fact that we haven't been able to, shut off water services. So the collection rates on those are down year over year. And when you take a look at, when you look at wastewater and environmental sanitation year over year, it differs in the magnitude. Wastewater year over year is not as, the variance is not as large. In environmental sanitation, we are actually showing revenue growth compared to last year. And that is being driven by the fact that we have been awarded some revenues that were not collected last year that were transmitted this year. And the biggest one being the sale of the land across from the hospital. Remember how we knocked down that building? Well, we finally got that payment for that property. And so that is what is driving the positive variance year over year between environmental sanitation. It was because that one-time revenue return or reimbursement for us knocking down that facility or that building on behalf of the hospital. It is, I think, important for you to, when you take a look at the top column, that you want to come down and look at the middle column, because this is going to tell you how much our cash positions have changed since the start of the year. So where we were in April and where we are in June. And it starts to show you how things are deteriorating because of income tax collections. It's not because of other areas, because the other areas are much smaller in how much revenue we collect, and we're getting those monies. It's our income tax, which is our major revenue source. And you can see when you look at the middle column and you look at fire and you look at the general fund and you look at water, where you were in April and where we are at June, you are seeing that we are in essence burning through cash faster than we're collecting it, meaning our expenditures for overhead are greater than the amount of money that we're bringing in to offset those expenditures. And the area that it's most alarming is fire, because we had all that overtime that occurred at the beginning of the year. And we also had, when you compare to where we were in April and you compare to June, we still haven't been reimbursed yet from CDA for our fire truck lease. So that happens on June 25th of last year. This year it happened on July 2nd. So there's a timing there that is throwing that 280,000 that is showing in the red. There would be a reimbursement of $86,000 that it's a timing. So it's not as severe as it looks, but it is still alarming that our revenue collections for that fund are already, our cash position for that fund is already in the red. And you'll see that when you get down to the bottom where we are, because this is, as of June 30th, how much cash we have in each of these funds. So the fire fund is now negative, as of June 30th, negative 280. We will restore monies as we continue transfers and expenditures start to shrink. The problem is, if income tax collections don't pick up, this variance will get larger at year end. And that's why we'll have to, in the reconciliation budget, as I discussed earlier, we may have to give more to fire to get that fund out of the red than we initially budgeted because of the decline in income tax. So when you look at the water line and you're coming down, this is again the middle column. We started the year with 2.1 million. As of the end of April, we had nearly 2.1, but at the end of June, we're down to 1.9. We are using about 100,000 more a month than what we're actually collecting. The concern is, as we get closer to the end of the year and we have to make some large debt service payments, we could see this go into the red. So Harry and I and the mayor have already started talking about, are there projects that if we need to stop or postpone starting, we could, and push it into the next year, because as of July 1, we converted back those 10 cents that was going into environmental sanitation, which will now be funneling into water. We hope that we'll start to see that start to build again. And hopefully we can end the year where we keep this fund in the black, but we are focused on it and we are paying attention to it, because as we spend money through the remainder of the year, we've got to be conscientious of how much revenue we're collecting. And if we have problems with receivables, that could cause this problem to actually escalate. So we've got to make sure that the water department is out there actively shutting off accounts to get people to turn around and come in and pay their bills.
So for the water fund, the $10 change should help. And then also just our ability now to go back and collect again, where we weren't able to do that under the COVID stuff, should help that fund, right? Get back to its level.
Through the chair. When I say its level, that'll be a much healthier next year when you have that activity, hopefully not, where it's a full 12 months. We don't know how many of these accounts are going to come in and people ask to go on payment plans because they had to divert those monies they normally would have used to pay bills. And we left the water on, and those bills have gotten to the point they probably can't pay them all off. So they may be on payment plans. So that money will materialize. It just may not all materialize in this current calendar year. And that's what we've got to be conscientious of, is how we manage closing the year out and making sure that this fund does not go into the red.
We don't want to get in a situation where the general fund has to subsidize our enterprise funds.
No, that is the last thing we want.
And then the wastewater fund, have we seen any of the loans come in to help? Because I know we were using cash on hand to pay for the long-term control plan because we hadn't had those loans come through. Have we seen those now? I know we were approved, back in January. Is that gonna help here at all?
Through the chair. We are going to get our first of 2 payments in August. Right now, that fund, of course, has available cash of close to over $3 million. It's going to, by year end, be in the ballpark of 10 to 11. But remember, we've got larger debt service. So the idea was with the rate hike was we need to get through these beginning years and that rate hike to then sustain. So this fund itself is going to start to see cash starting to trim each year going out as we get the higher debt levels. But yes, this one will be fully replenished and has no issue right now and will only be healthier at year end. But you will start to see when we do next year's budget, because we just made our OWDA loan payments in July. Last year, we paid $1.1 million in principal and interest. This year, without 3 of the loans even not in place yet, the total payment for June was $2.2 million. So we've already increased 1.1 in just 1 year. And then next year, almost all the loans will be scheduled in. It's going to be over 3.3 a year in debt service for the 77 million that we borrowed to do all of those projects. So I mean, we're in a much healthier place with that fund, but that fund down the road, we're going to have to keep an eye on how we spend, because if we start spending more than what we're bringing in, we're going to then harm the health of that fund. And everybody is conscientious of that, because this rate increase, we hope, will be enough to sustain us through phase 1. I know that Chuck is going to start talking to you about what we're going to have to do next, because he's under that consent decree to start phase 2. And we haven't moved on any planning yet. And so we're going to have to start addressing what is our next step, because it is going to be a legal issue if we're going to take a stance that we're not going to go forward.
Samantha?
Thank you through the chair. In regards to the water, didn't we see an uptick in the bills being paid last month or the month before?
Through the chair, yes. When Harry sent out these special letters for receivables that were outside of 60 days, there was a sizable uptick, but those collections didn't occur till July. So this, remember, is only through June 30th. So you're not going to see that until next month. But I can run a report right now. If you give me a minute, we'll answer some other questions and tell you where we were through July 30th, because we have almost reconciled July. And let me tell you what we have for cash on hand at the end of July. So give me a second and maybe ask another question. I'll at least run that report and give you an update.
Does anyone else have any more questions right now in this section? Okay. I don't see any.
Give me 1 second before we move on to the last column, and I'll give you an update on water here.
Kyle, I'm assuming you're having conversations with businesses in the community. And now that they're probably going into Q4 here, or close to, they're thinking about it, right? What are they saying? What kind of feeling are you getting from them?
Well, through the chair, I'm on the phone once a month with Valorec, and they don't have a lot of positive feedback to give at the moment. They are still maintaining that their employees are on payroll. They're covering them for healthcare coverage, but those hours have been cut back, so they're not getting a full 40-hour pay week. We have seen an uptick in withholding coming from Mercy Health. That was a lot attributed to the fact that when Northside closed, they increased employment because they hired on a lot of those workers that were at the hospital that shut its doors. Construction activity is surprisingly strong. We are, again, we drive some of that, but because of all of the projects going on downtown, we are seeing healthy withholding numbers from our large excavating companies here locally, and a few that are outside the city that are working here. So that is a good barometer for activity. I'm hoping, like I wanted to talk to you about income tax, and we'll get there in a few minutes, but the RETA data did not come out today, so it's going to come out tomorrow. So I will not have that update for you today. But I'm looking, as I will get to later on, looking for a benchmark to look at, has our withholding base stabilized? And if that's the case, that'll be very encouraging also. But we'll move on to that once I get done with this report that we're addressing right now. But I do have the July ending cash balance in the water fund, and it has gone from, at the end of June, of being $1,856,000, we are back to $2,212,000 at the end of July. So there was an uptick as a result of one of two things, either less spending or revenue enhancement that occurred in July. I'm just looking at the cash balance, which shows me that it improved, and it improved by $300,000. So that is a good sign. Okay. All right, let's move down now to the last section. This, I believe, is important because this helps you to see our trend of where we were last year at this time cash-wise and where we are this year. And the one that I think is most important to understand is water. When you look at water, we began 19 at 4.4. We ended at 2.1. So over the course of the year, we used $2 million of our working capital. Well, when you look at where we started 2020 at 2.1, if that same trend continues, we're going to be very close to, in essence, running out of cash at the end of the year. The one caveat that we need to consider is, though, that on July 1, we started diverting that extra $10 back into the fund. So Harry and I are optimistic that if we are careful with how we spend, we will make sure that we end the year in the black. But it's important to appreciate that history usually repeats itself when you look at the enterprise funds because of just how they operate, and water especially. It is a service driven by the delivery of water sales and then us collecting on those. And so outside of a few projects, it's overhead for payroll and benefits, and it's how much water gets consumption or how much consumption of water gets used. It's not as similar as wastewater because we don't have the kind of breaks on the water side that we have on the wastewater side. So it is an area that we are concentrating and focusing our attention on. The other area is fire. Fires year over year difference is nearly $900,000. Again, this is attributable to the fact that expenditures are higher in the beginning of the year, the fact that income tax collections are lower, which directly affects fire. We may be having to, like I said, increase our subsidy at year end to, in essence, correct for this fund if that is the decision of council and the administration to handle it in that manner, where the general fund absorbs all of the pain versus us, in essence, injecting or not injecting capital into those other funds to bring them out of the red. But that will be a decision that we will evaluate as we get closer to the end of the year. But this is where we stand year over year, and you can see that almost nearly all of our funds were lower at the end of June of 2020 versus June of 19. So I just want to make you aware of that and why we're concerned and why we need to make sure that we pay attention to our cash position.
Are there any questions?
Okay, let's move on to the income tax. This is a gross income tax collection for this calendar year. As I had told Valencia, I had hoped to have a July number today for you. I checked this morning. Rita did not release it. It's going to be released tomorrow because that is the calendar date that it's released. That's the last day that it can be released on. But as you can see, we are down this year against the budget through June nearly 7%, which equates to roughly 1.9 million against those particular target months. Year to date, year over year, the budget was 1% less. So we are, in essence, when you look up above, 8% shy of where we were collection-wise against income tax collections last year compared to this year. I'm hopeful that when we get July, we will be able to have a comparison, because remember, of this 46 million, 38 of it, and these are gross collections, comes from our monthly large businesses. This is our monthly withholding that gets transmitted to us from our employers that are in the city. That is the bulk of how we collect income tax. I'm going to try to compare the monies that we collected in June with the money that we'll collect in July. And remember, that is for May's earnings and June's earnings. And if we can see that they're holding level, it will at least give me a level of confidence to believe that our working base is not shrinking, that it's, in essence, flatlined. And going forward, we should only potentially see upside unless we see a spike in, cases. We have, in essence, bottomed out, and maybe we'll start growing. The rate of growth will, of course, be very slow, but at least gives me a level of confidence to say, okay, this is our new baseline. And if we forecast going forward, what is that impact going to be over the remainder of the year? I believe that 3 million is probably now our target. I'm hopeful that we don't go greater than that, because if we start getting a variance larger than that, it's going to be harder for us to close that gap. One of the things that I discussed earlier with the mayor, there is a Senate bill that is being, in essence, championed by all of the large cities in Ohio, where we are asking that the commuter tax be repealed. And the reason that we're asking for that is all of these employees that work for businesses in the city of Youngstown, if they're staying at home and working from home, they are not coming into the city. They potentially, like a doctor, like a lawyer, next year could, if they have more than 30 days where they have worked outside of the city, they could actually request a refund of their income taxes that were withheld by their employers because they're working outside of Youngstown. So there is a Senate bill that has support of all of the large cities asking that that gets repealed, so that if you are a commuter, you are going to still be responsible to have your employer withhold, and you will not be able to, in essence, claim a refund next year. If this is unsuccessful in getting put in place, we are going to see a barrage of refund requests next year from multiple sources. And the concern is, if more and more employers start, in essence, having employees work from home, this is going to change the landscape of how Ohio collects income taxes, because it will no longer be driven by where the workplace is. It'll be more driven by where the employee lives. And unfortunately for Youngstown, most of our income tax, nearly 88% of it, is collected from people who live outside the city.
There's a lawsuit going on around that too, I think.
Through the chair. Yes, there is.
So, okay, Mike, do you have a question?
No, just more, I mean, sharing your concern, and we need to follow that and make sure we are, putting our support and pressure towards keeping it. I mean, if there's going to be a change, it can't happen overnight. You're going to cripple cities all over the state. They'll collapse. So we need to figure something out and make sure we're communicating that and expressing that concern to those lawmakers.
Julius?
I think at the same time, our economic development department needs to be strengthened so that we can pull more companies and bring more jobs into the city for Youngstown residents at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, we for sure need to diversify our base.
Through the chair, the thing that's concerning is YSU, them being one of our largest employers. And if professors who get paid well start staying at home and actually teaching, via, utilizing, the internet, that could have a very large detrimental effect, just because they're a large withholder for the city. The manufacturing jobs, that's not going to have much of an impact there. Some of the white collar jobs could, but the real impact is in some of those service jobs and higher education and lower education, because even if teachers in Youngstown are doing the same thing, it's changing the landscape dramatically. And I got to believe that we're not alone in highlighting the impact in the importance of the way we tax workers in Ohio. And given that the General Assembly is already addressing it and it's already being discussed, given this early in the legislative calendar, I got to believe that there's going to be a lot of support to get this accomplished, just because the support's going to be coming from all of the large areas versus the smaller townships. Of course, they look this as a windfall because they generate income through sales tax. And if people have more disposable income, they're going to go out and spend it, and they're going to spend it on things that get taxed, which are going to help the Boardmans in the Austin towns, but at the expense of the Youngstown and the Warren and the Niles. So you got to believe that when you have the big hitters like Columbus, Toledo, Dayton, Youngstown, Cleveland, all pushing for this to change, that it's going to gain some serious traction. The question is going to be, will there be enough support versus what the townships are going to, in essence, not like the idea, because the townships are going to be the ones that are going to gain as a result of this change in the landscape. Does anybody have any more questions on income tax and this whole repeal of the commuter tax?
I do.
Jimmy?
To the chair. Cal, I'm trying to follow you on this proposed change that's going on, but not all townships and whatnot has an income tax on the books. So if we lose it and it goes back and they don't have it, are they still to collect it?
No, through the chair, we will collect the income tax if the employee works from home because their employer is in the city. They'll remit their withholding to us. What'll happen is next year, when those employees file their taxes with RITA, they'll request refunds for income that was withheld in 2020. And if that becomes the new pattern, meaning employers are allowing their employees to work from remote sites, we will collect, but then our refund amounts will grow. Right now, we refund about $1 to $1.2 million a year of our total collections. We will see that increase. So we'll still have our withholding growing at the gross collections, but our refunds will start getting much larger because we'll have to return the money that was withheld because those employees worked outside the city, where in the past they used to work at the work site.
I
That
get
make
you.
sense, Jimmy?
Yeah, it makes sense. I was just, through the chair, I was just trying to follow I thought I heard two concepts of it. And when they didn't work at home, and or say is that the only part they was changing, the working at home part or whatnot there? So if they didn't, no one's getting it, but if they work at home, no one else is getting the money.
Through the chair. No one else will get the actual income tax. But remember, if you get this refund, you're getting your tax dollars back from Youngstown and say you live in the township. Well, if you take that money that no longer is tax and you go spend it and you buy something, sales tax is generated. Sales tax is how townships survive. So if you have more money to spend, you're going to spend it wherever you spend it. But if you spend it in Boardman because you live in Boardman, Boardman's going to have a greater share of income tax driven by a greater share of sales tax driven by that consumption. And so they'll be better off, but we'll be worse off because we had to give them a refund of our income tax and they then went and spent it where they live, and it drove consumption, which drove sales tax, which drives revenues to a township.
Yes, thank you.
Samantha? Oh, no. Okay. I think we're good. Go ahead, Kyle.
I'm going to tomorrow, as soon as I get income tax, I will inform the mayor of what we collected. I will then reach out to Valencia with this one page so that it'll get updated, and then she will share it with you. And that will be done first before anybody else other than the mayor gets that information. I'll share it with you once I finish sharing it with him. So if you have questions and you have any concerns, don't hesitate to contact me. But once I share it with you, it will become public, and then the media will probably contact me, asking me for that information. But right now, I do not have it at my disposal. I had hoped to, but like I said, I should have it tomorrow.
Anita?
Yes, this is going back. I just missed the dollar amount that you told us that annually we refund $1 to $1.2 million.
Yes.
Is that correct?
So
okay.
Correct, through the chair. So ultimately, what RITA transmits to us at the end of each month is a net total. They transmit to us after they've taken the refunds and after they've taken their 3% that they withhold. They then transmit to us the remainder. At the end of the year, they determine how much of that money that they retain to operate, they then return it the next year. So the last 4 years, our percentage has been declining. At the end of the year, they usually they keep about 1.2% of our total income tax, but it has been declining. But under the agreement, they keep 3% from everybody up front, and then they return it in a lump sum check that we deposit into the general fund every year. And we budget for it. And our budget this year for that amount was, one second. We budgeted 826,000. We received 883,000 back. So what they gave us back was greater than what I forecasted. And that was as a result, because as they get larger, our share of overhead declines. Are you following me?
Yes.
So there, but everybody is required to give them 3% upfront, and then they calculate what our share as a percent of all their expenditures over all their communities, and then they return it to us the next calendar year. And they also identify what our percentage share is. And last year, it was 1.04%, because we just shared this with the auditors who are in my office right now doing our audit. And so 1.04% is what Rita is keeping of our income taxes to in essence, provide that service of collecting and being a quasi-public entity that in essence is subsidized by all the communities that are under its umbrella.
Okay. And one other point of clarification to the chair.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So Cal, so on the income tax, what you're talking about with that proposed bill to protect the cities, if this bill is not in place, even our city workers, if they were working from home, would not be required to pay that income tax.
Through the chair, the income tax will be withheld. They'll actually next year put through a refund request.
Right.
So it'll come out of next year's income tax because it'll reduce our collection. But yes, in essence, yes, they could conceivably request a refund of their income taxes that were withheld by the city as the employer. Correct.
If they were working virtually from home for us.
Correct.
Thank you.
And that's through the chair, as long as they don't live in Youngstown.
Correct.
Yes.
Gotcha. But those who live in Youngstown would continue to be.
Through the chair, because they live here, their taxes, no matter
will be
where
paying
they're
it.
earning
Yes,
them,
I got
are
it.
required to be remitted to the city because they actually live in the city.
No, I just wanted to just to get it there and have it clear that even city workers would be
That is correct.
able to get that refund.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Moving on to the third item. The mayor is on board to sponsor legislation if council would be party to joining in that sponsoring of a charter change that will, in essence, decouple the finance director's position from the requirement that his salary be tied to 80% of what the mayor makes. The mayor understands that looking forward and trying to evaluate if there's going to be planning for the future, and if you're going to potentially, under a new administration next year, if things change, if council would not support a change in the mayor's salary, that if we do not have the ability to, through the request of this charter change, where council would set the pay rate of the finance director, if the charter change was approved by voters, this would in essence allow for one, that the position would not be in essence handcuffed because right now, the salary that the finance director position pays is currently less than 2 employees that work for the finance director. The last change in that salary increase was back in 2006. The only time that that salary can be changed is the last year of a term of a administration under the charter and by the approval of council. So the mayor has put together legislation that we would put up in front of you because there is a deadline for the charter review for it to actually be on the ballot. That is September 4. And given that council has a meeting scheduled before the end of August, we are looking to find out if council as a whole will support this change and put it to the voters to see if they would, in essence, pass that change or take the stance that they want to continue the way it is and to not address it. I can answer any questions that you may have on this because it does deal directly with the position that I'm in.
Julius?
My first question would be, why wait till the deadline? The second question would be, and forgive me if I missed it, but has the mayor actually chosen a finance director? Kyle, I know you're in that position still, but are you, I mean, I thought we were still waiting for the mayor to actually appoint a finance director. And I kind of think this is something that kind of needs an explanation from the mayor himself. I mean, I get that this directly affects you, Kyle, but it's like it's at the last minute. It's potentially the deadline.
Chair.
I don't know if we have a finance director that has been put in this position. Is that finance director going to be you, or is it going to be somebody else that still has to be approved by council? And I kind of would like an explanation from the mayor.
Through the chair, I can completely understand that. That's why we're trying to get out in front of you right now. Here's the thing that you need to consider. And the mayor, I think that's the mayor wants to be in dialogue with you. I think that's why he wanted to find out, would you consider this given that of the window that we have? But even if I'm not the person he chooses, you have to appreciate that if you are out there searching in the future for a finance director, one of the things that you need to be conscientious of is right now, the only time that salary can change is every 4 years, and it hasn't changed since 2006. And the only way it can change is the mayor's salary increases. So you have to increase the mayor's salary to affect what the law director and the finance director gets. So the mayor's thinking was, if we decouple this, at least the charter would then still mandate that if the mayor's salary were to increase, the law director's salary increase. But if there is no change, those salaries stay fixed as they are. If you're going to be out there needing someday to find a finance director and you have positions that work for the finance director and they make more than the finance director, that's going to be very difficult to fill that role when people are working on behalf of the department being paid more than that person who's in charge. 2, there's only a window of every 4 years for this to be addressed. So at this next term, if something doesn't change at council, or council doesn't choose to do something, you're going to handcuff that administration if they need to go out and find somebody, because for you to entice somebody to take this job, you got to be able to at least offer him what other department heads are comparable or making, because to ask somebody to come in that role with that skill set is going to be difficult. And as you can have seen, the mayor has struggled with trying to fill that because candidate-wise, there's not a large pool of people with that type of expertise. So I agree that maybe the mayor needs to be in dialogue with you, and that's why we still have 2 weeks between now and that next council meeting. But I was hopeful to answer some of the questions and at least give you some background so that you understood why we wanted to get out in front of you today because of the opportunity.
Julius?
Follow up. Thank you, through the chair. So number one, I'm not sure or comfortable right now with the current climate of our finances that you just described to us, that it's the correct time to go to our citizens and ask for a raise for anybody. Kyle, you my guy. Like,
But through the chair, you have a finance director position that is filled in a deputy. So if I go back, remember, you're now going to have to go out and hire somebody, and you're going to have to then pay 2 salaries. For right now, that's what you got to consider. Is it better to have 1 salary or to pay 2? Because if somebody else, something happens to me, you have to hire somebody, and you may have to hire 2, especially if there's nobody with a background to then assist. So it's either you invest now for the future, or you roll the dice and you take your chances. And this is the time that you don't want to be in that kind of predicament, because if you don't have somebody who can lead, you're now going to be rudderless, and that's what you don't want to have happen.
I get it. Still, to my follow-up, I would be more comfortable with this conversation if I was having it with the mayor instead of the intern finance director. You know what I mean? Because it's kind of like it's not like you selling yourself to get a raise.
I can't.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
Right. But it could appear that way. You know what I mean? So I would rather be talking to the mayor and the mayor explaining his position on why this needs to happen. And I do understand it. I just wanted to make that clear.
Understand.
This is neither here nor there, but technically you're just changing the language so council has control over what that dollar figure is. We can make it more or less. We don't have to make it more.
Through the chair. No, actually it would be by decoupling, it's completely in council's control now, meaning it doesn't mean that it changes. It's just that you now at least have the ability to do something, where right now, the way it's set up, there is no mechanism for you to do anything. If something were to occur, you have no tools at your disposal.
Mike?
I would just say that, I understand and, what you're saying, Kyle, and it makes sense. However, we probably should look at, if we were going to make, changes to the charter, what else makes sense? Because we have fixed dollar amounts in there that don't really make sense. Because when you change a salary, why should you have to go to the citizens to change that salary? Like the mayor's salary has been fixed all those years, and the 80% are there, and those haven't changed in years. So you have to do a charter amendment, which is costly. Putting that on the ballot even, and the time it takes to do that, when we should probably update those sections of the charter, something that makes sense and is more fluid, that wouldn't require charter amendments. But that's my 2 cents.
Anita?
To the chair. Also, and I see Attorney Vivo, I imagine he's here in place of Jeff Limbian. But we have Cal right now is the interim, not the director. Even though I'm not quite understanding what's the difference. But if we have right now, we have only the confirmation authority within our purview. But if the mayor wants to, he can fire our interim or whoever it is whenever he chooses to. Now, and I have a problem with that, and with the mayor bringing this right now. I could see down the road where he brings in, even with right now, because Cal is only the interim, he brings in yet another person, but at a higher rate. And Attorney Vivo, am I right or wrong that he could do that if we were to pass this?
Good morning, and to the chair. Correct me if I'm wrong. Your question is, the mayor's
my thing is, right now, we only have the ability to confirm, but there's none that stops the mayor from this mayor or any mayor from firing a person, firing our finance director with or without our permission. It's all under him. We don't have any controls. With this in place, would we have any input on him dismissing our finance director? Does it change that? That's my question.
Okay, I think that the only revision that is proposed here is the ability for council to set a salary different than the 80% schedule. So whatever, it doesn't change anything else. So I think the answer to your question is yes. Is that what you're asking me?
So Anita, are you fearful that, say we pass this and the next thing the mayor does is fire Kyle and hire somebody new? Now because he has more money to be able to go do that.
Exactly.
And that's not something that
And that is not something
we'd want to happen.
right. I mean, I could be, looking
And
down.
we're not saying that that's what he's going to do. It's just a concern that would probably want to hear from him on, and perhaps he needs to first confirm Kyle officially as a finance director.
I would like to see him. I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
There is no interim. I mean, the mayor may interpret it as interim. We either have, Attorney Libyan said in that first meeting, we either have a finance director or we don't. So, I mean, the mayor's view is Kyle's, but he is our finance director.
I see him that way too.
That's semantics. I'm sorry, I don't mean to get into the weeds.
Yeah.
Sorry, but
Yeah.
I have an appreciation for what you're saying. I do.
Thank you.
So I guess my questions would be more for Attorney Vivo, or just around like the actual wording in our charter. I think it refers more to like the Board of Control itself, not specifically each department, like each director head. Would we be changing the language of the Board of Control as well? Or amendments needed there? And why not pull both out? Like, why only pull finance director? Why not just pull law director too at the same time, if it's really about the Board of Control when it comes to the terminology or language in the charter?
To the chair again, I believe that's a question addressed to me. I don't want to overstep my bounds or answer something that I don't have the answer to. But I do reference what Kyle indicated a moment ago, which is this proposed change, I think, is just to be able to establish a salary commensurate with a potential finance director's qualifications, as opposed to it being tied to a percentage of the other people's other employees or other officials' salaries, which is the way that it occurs now. But that appears to be a conversation that Kyle and the mayor had. So I think that the question again was, or the answer again was best explained by Kyle, why this would be something that's considered. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, not really. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Well, I want to answer your question. So maybe more specifically, what am I missing?
I get why Kyle and the mayor discussed pulling Kyle out, but from a legal like terminology, the way the things are written, the way that our charter is written, wouldn't we at the same time have to change these part about the charter that identifies it as the Board of Control versus specifically finance, specifically law director? And wouldn't it be cleaner to have it all match and have the law director and the finance director pulled out? And that might just be a personal opinion, not a legal question, but
I would, yes, to the chair, I would agree with you that it is, I don't want to say a personal opinion, but I think it's certainly something within the legislative end's perspective to make that decision, whether they want to change both or any portion or none at all. But from a legal perspective, I think it's, I don't think it has any bearing at all.
Anita?
So the language we would be striking would be the salary for the other members of the Board of Control shall be 80%. So if we're striking that, then the new language should, I'm in total agreement with you, which is that the salary for the finance director and the law director shall be set by ordinance of city council. This way, we would not be set on a certain figure, but wouldn't you be paying someone commensurate with their level of experience? You know, like if you have a person who's like Cal, you know, who knows what they're doing, as opposed to a newbie. You know, we're paying, you know, based upon your experience, and not just the position, but what you actually bring to the table as well.
Through the
Cal
chair,
is,
can I say something?
Kyle, go ahead.
When I've reviewed other positions for finance director, they usually have a large range and they base it on knowledge. If you think that introducing the law director and doing the same thing, I don't think the administration opposed to that. We were coming to you with one item. If you believe that doing both and setting a range and then having council established, that would be great too. My biggest concern is the window and how this works, that it's a 4-year process. And if you don't act now, we're pretty much going to, in essence, not be able to do much more going forward. And if things were to change, you're not going to have any tools at your disposal to actually move on in this. So if you wanted to, and this was approved, you as council would set the range and you would dictate, do you want to have steps? How you want to go about establishing how you would pay those two people, because you're in charge of the master salary through actions of your body.
through the chair.
Go ahead, Anita.
I'm still a little bit, but I am confused. So we can only do a charter change in the general election?
Is the charter change can only be done every, is it at the 3rd year of every administration? Is that when the mayor can pull a charter committee together?
No.
Is that not correct?
I would think anytime a citizen brought forward a petition asking for a charter change, it has to go on the next ballot.
But that's a citizen.
Or if council brings forward something, I think we did our thing in the primary, or am I wrong?
Okay.
Yeah, I think we'd have to check on that. I think, Anita, I'm leaning towards you, and Mike stepped away, but he probably would be the expert on that, to be honest. But yeah, we can find that out. That's not a big deal to find out.
Okay.
I'm
I'm in full support of Cal. Absolutely, you know I am. If you getting that pay increase, because you do the job of 2 people, not 1. And I don't think the public appreciates. It may sound like we're just trying to put money into someone's hands, but when you got someone who's literally doing 2 jobs versus 1 job, that person needs to be compensated in some fashion.
Well, I think I was just hung up on, just for Attorney Vivo's clarification, the fact that that line that she just read said the Board of Control shall blah, 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 instead of, so we would have to sort of, if you only pulled 1 out, you'd have to change that line. We couldn't refer to it as the Board of Control in that whole scenario. I'm getting too detailed though. I'm getting in the weeds. So anyway, Samantha, you can ask your question.
Thank you, through the chair. I first want to say is I'm all for paying someone for their skills, because I'm a firm believer in you get what you pay for. And we need to make sure people are compensated properly in order to attract the proper and the right amount of talent. But correct me, did I miss something? Did the mayor convene a charter review committee, or did we just pick this out the charter too? Because he has to convene a committee to propose his charter reviews. But did that happen?
No, he does not. The mayor can, through the chair, the mayor can sponsor a charter review and put it forth in front of council. And it has been done by Jay Williams. It's been done by, since I've been here, by Jay a few times, by Mayor Samarone, and by Mayor McNally.
Okay, so no charter review, this is just the one thing he wants to change in the charter in this 3rd year.
Well, through the chair, I believe because of what occurred this summer, he was not able to get together people to come in. And so this was, again, the window is shrunk, and this is right now, the one item at least he was willing to support and see if we could get it on the ballot.
So, and then, thank you, through the chair. And then to Councilman Oliver's point, I would like to hear from the mayor because changing one person's salary, there's a change that has to happen, including in his salary as well, I think. So I would like to hear his rationale and, why this came to the forefront before I could even begin to make a quality informed decision.
Mike,
No, I think they answered, but yeah, I mean, anybody who could introduce legislation, being us or the mayor, could propose a charter amendment. The people still have to vote on it. That's all.
and Mike, I think you stepped away, but do you know, we can do charter amendments at any election term, right? It doesn't have to be only a general election or every 3 years or something like that, right? Do you know?
I believe, I'm not positive. I think we've always done them in the general, not the primary. However, if we were making a change that was substantial, we could, in fact, if it was so pressing that we felt as though we can change that whole section and correct that and bring those other things. I think some of my other colleagues were mentioning finance or law. I mean, if we're going to fix something, fix it all. Don't just line item fix that one boutique thing, and let's really look at it. And then we could do that, I believe, because we'd be making that change. However, you have to look at which sections, because from my experience in some of the charter amendments we've done before, you can't do like in different places. You'd have to change each section. So we'd be voting on each portion. But I don't think it's a ton of sections to change, maybe 1 or 2, 3 at most.
Through the chair.
Anita? Go ahead. Oh yeah, Anita, I saw your hand up, but I think then maybe Nikki was trying to say something too, but you want to ask your question, Anita?
Yes, through the chair. Attorney Vivo, I would like you to look up this question about when we can make put forward a charter thing if it's restricted to only a general election and only a general election, that it can't happen during a primary as well. I just want to have my question answered, because if it's only the general election, that's fine. We'd have to wait a year, and I don't want to wait a year to make this change. But if it can be done through a primary, that's only a matter of months. So if you can get that answer, and this email.
Yes, thank you to the chair. I'm reading now, but I don't want to give you a definitive answer if that's okay, but we'll email something out to all members of council and important parties.
Lauren, I've had my hand up. I don't know if you can see me.
I don't see you at all. Oh, there you are. Hi. Sorry. Go ahead, Julia.
I just wanted to make a statement. I'm just tired of council's back being against the wall all the time when it comes to making decisions against deadlines. Like, that kind of stuff got to stop. And I'm just wondering, kind of like with my point I was making earlier, like, why now? We've been under this administration for what, 3 years? Like, why now? You know what I mean? So I just need a little bit of an explanation. I'm all in support of Kyle and the work that he's doing. I think he's a great finance director. But like I said, I just think we need to hear from the mayor on this.
Anita?
Well, maybe we can convene a meeting of the whole with the mayor and without delay, and get this thing discussed, because I agree with Julius. And to give us a September 4th deadline, I mean, we need to have a committee meeting of the whole before the September 4th, and with the mayor, so we can discuss this. Thank you.
I mean, we could do a committee of the whole. I think we have a legislative committee that was formed specifically for charter amendments.
Wow, who's on it?
Too, that is out there too, but I don't think it really would matter which direction we went with that. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments around this issue right now? What do we want our next? What do we want our next steps to be? Do we want to schedule that meeting then and have the law department bring the actual piece of legislation that they're asking for written up, the change that would need to be made? Anita?
To the chair, I'd like to have that draft legislation, but I would like to see that legislation include the law director within that wording and not just the finance director, thereby taking it out of, thereby not fixing it to the Board of Control. I just don't like that way that's been worded. So if he could do that.
Okay. And then just also make sure that they confirm the rules around when we can place a charter amendment on the ballot. And then just to get into the weeds again, semantics here, but do we need to, I mean, well, so Kyle is serving in that role. Council never formally did our approval, did we? We formally approved Kyle. Yeah, so never mind. I'm sorry.
Through the
Yeah.
chair, I don't know that, I think Valencia needs to check the minutes. I don't know if it actually, did you vote to actually confirm?
We did.
Okay,
I
good.
remember voting, but we could double check on that.
Valencia would be
Make
able
sure.
to confirm that.
Yeah, let's make sure, for sure. Okay. Okay, any other questions or comments on this issue, right, for right now?
Through the chair, this is Nikki. I'm
Nikki,
sorry.
yeah,
I
go
had my hand raised on the computer icons and you probably didn't see it.
Oh,
so I
no, I'm sorry, I
apologize.
did not see it at all.
No, I apologize. So being that this is a charter review year, to Samantha's point, a charter review committee would have normally been convened this year and it was not. So one of the changes that the mayor was seeking to make with regard to the finance director salary was to not keep him or that position strapped in the way it is now, where other employees in the department through step increases and through, you know, the increases that are annual increases are making more than that position. So that was one of the immediate changes that he wanted to make. And then also not having it carry over into whatever the next administration looks like for another 4 years, so that, you know, if Kyle, God forbid, you know, with all the talent that he has helping us through this season, we don't want somewhere else to attract Kyle. So we want to make sure that we're able to keep our own talent here that we recognize that has been beneficial in helping this city move along as well. So we don't want to strap him or handicap, you know, that finance position, whereas Kyle might be attractive to another city because our salary is so low.
Okay, thanks, Nikki. Anything else? Okay, so we'll look to set up, I guess, a committee of the whole meeting in the next, well, you know, whatever the law department's ready. You let us know when you're ready for us on your end. And that's the last item on the agenda here. So we just have to schedule our next meeting. Kyle, when do you want us to meet with you again for, you know, our budget stuff?
Through the chair, I think we need to meet sooner than waiting till the actual quarter ends, only because I think this next income tax, if it does come in, as I hope it does, I'll be able to then come up with what I think we're going to end up short for the year. And based on what we have in resources with regards to the workers' comp, in regards to the savings that materialize out of the volunteer layoffs, and then telling you about how we are trying to figure out how to use these COVID funds to close that gap and some of the things that we're struggling with. And it's important that you be made aware of how the mayor, along with the governor, how all this is, how they're trying to work with Congress and getting this handcuffed, because it's very restrictive. We've got these resources. We don't want to spend it. We want to use it to, in essence, close the gap and make sure that you're up to speed. So I don't think we should wait any longer than mid-September to get back together and talk about maybe where we are through July and August, but give you an update on where we are spending, because spending is current. It's the other things that, like the income taxes that are slowly, that come in, but I think we need to meet sooner so that you're kept abreast of the situation.
Okay, then we can look to schedule something mid-September. We'll just look at our calendars and I'll send an email out to get that started. Samantha?
Thank you through the chair. I would like to, at that meeting, I would like to see some more of the department heads, more specifically water, fire, street, park, police, just because as we go through each part of it, there, questions around either what they've done and even their own feelings on how they're proceeding. And I think it's all relevant to the conversation. So if that's possible, if we could add those people and so we can have a more robust conversation about, where we're going, especially as we move into this third quarter.
Look, yeah, Kyle, we can talk about how we can, if that's how to structure that, and keep it still to the point and succinct and not, it's not a budget hearing.
Got you. If we had a few questions that were probably the most important that you're looking for, that way they could be prepped. So in advance, they know that this is what your feedback is, and they can then at least individually announce what those answers are to all of you. And then maybe you could ask some questions versus doing each one individually, because that could drag out and we wouldn't potentially get off track, and we don't want that to happen. Because I think it's going to be important that you understand, once we go into this last 4 months of the year, what are we going to have to do given our circumstances?
Thanks. Okay. Samantha.
Thank you, the chair. So Cal, just the basically what you explained, from your perspective, where we are, what they've done, and how they're moving forward is basically what I would just like to hear from them. And let me use the example of the water department, where as we're showing down and you're able to pull that information, but if he could give us an idea of how he plans to move through this last 4 months of the year, from his perspective as a director. I mean, even if they just came with that summary, this is what we've done to date, and this is what I plan to do, and this is where our numbers should fall. And then, you can come and back them up with the hard numbers. But
Okay.
That type of information I think would be very helpful.
So as we pick a date, and the sooner we can get that date, we'll be able to start coordinating, because it's going to be a large audience. We have to make sure that everybody is here so that you guys are getting the insight and the feedback that you believe is critical for you guys to make decisions.
Okay. Anita, are you good at this point for adjournment?
Yes, motion to adjourn?
Second. Okay, we're adjourned here at 12:45. Thank you, Kyle. Thanks, everybody. Rick, it's all yours.
Thank you, Cal.